I'd like to welcome you to this latest meeting of the Association for Cypriot, Greek and Turkish Affairs. It gives me great pleasure this evening to introduce Andreas Constandinos. Andreas is, well, a newly minted PhD, so congratulations to him. I think, what is it, 2-3 weeks now?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, settling into it. His title of his talk this evening is America, Britain and the Cyprus Crisis of 1974, Calculated Conspiracy or Foreign Policy Failure. I don't think you get much more interesting than this, and topical and controversial, needless to say. By way of background, Andreas was born in Britain of Greek, Cypriot and German ancestry. He studied law at university and then qualified as a barrister-at-law at the Middle Temple. In 2005 to 2008, he carried out research in the Cyprus crisis of 1974 at the University of East Anglia, and he successfully completed his PhD in modern European history. He is currently studying clinical psychology at London South Bank University. Andreas, over to you.
Thank you very much, James. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Andreas Constandinos, and as James has just said, I've just recently completed my PhD at the University of East Anglia. I decided to tackle a very straightforward, non-controversial topic, Cyprus in 1974. But before I start to talk about my thesis, I thought I'd very briefly tell you a little bit about myself. James has done a bit of an introduction, but if I've learned one thing from history in the last few years is that what is incredibly important is to know your source, so that when you're reading someone's book or reading a document, you need to understand who the author is, what his motivation is for saying what he's saying, and where he's getting his information from. So I thought I'd do you the same courtesy. So as you've heard, my name is Andreas Constandinos. Well, my grandfather was from Cyprus. My father was born here in England, and I was also born here in London, just 10 minutes down the road. I'm of mixed ancestry. My mother is German, and I've never lived in Cyprus. So as a result of that, I've had, in the last 3 years, people say to me that I couldn't possibly be in a position to write about Cyprus because I've never lived there. And then the flip side is that because I have a Greek Cypriot name, by definition, anything that I write has to be Greek Cypriot propaganda. So I've sort of had both allegations thrown at me. Now, obviously, I'm going to refute both of those and say that because I've never lived in Cyprus and because I personally don't know anyone who became a refugee in 1974 or who was killed or hurt during the fighting, I think I've been able to approach a very sensitive and emotional subject objectively, and I hope that you'll agree when you listen to me speak. My motivation is a personal one. Before I knew anything about 1974, I never understood, when I spoke to Cypriots, how I could get completely different versions of what happened in 1974. And I think because I'm half German and you're taught ad nauseum about the Second World War, I couldn't understand how all these different people would tell you different stories of one particular event in history. So I wanted to find out for myself and try to separate fact from fiction, if you like. And I was lucky because when I started the PhD, it coincided with the opening of the archives in Britain and America. So I trawled my way for 2.5 years through all the documents, dusty documents in Kew and in Washington, and I tried to supplement that with all sorts of other material that's out there: National Security Archive material, CIA material, congressional reports, newspapers from Britain, from America, from Greece, from Turkey, from Cyprus, from all over the place. I spoke to people, politicians in Cyprus, officials in America and officials in Britain, and I've tried to put it all together to try and make sense of 1974. Okay, so what am I going to talk to you about today? Well, my supervisor would be very concerned if I could condense 3 years worth of research into a talk of 40 minutes. And as you all know, Cyprus is an incredibly complex subject, and I actually find my talk somewhat unsatisfactory because it's so complex, and there's so much I'd like to say to you. I'd like to spend all evening with you, but I'm sure you all have better things you'd like to do on your Friday night, so I'll try and condense it. But essentially what I was looking at was whether or not Britain and America were involved in a conspiracy in 1974. And I'm sure a lot of people in this room are aware of the existing literature on the subject. most notably the O'Malley and Craig book, or authors like Christopher Hitchens, who have argued that there was a conspiracy in 1974. Then you get people like Lawrence Stern, or more recently Claude Nicolette, who have argued that it was a failure of diplomacy that led to the crisis in 1974. So I'm going to talk to you today about what was Britain's interest in Cyprus, what were America's interests in Cyprus, what was their involvement in the coup, what was their involvement in the invasion, and I'll start by looking at the two protagonists as far as Britain and America are concerned, British Foreign Secretary James Callaghan and American Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. Some of you may have noticed that I used the word invasion as opposed to intervention a moment ago. I know that the terminology that surrounds the Cyprus problem is almost as emotive as the actual subject itself, and throughout my thesis I've tried to explain why I've used certain words in certain places. The reason I use the word invasion is because although I think initially there are legal arguments to say that Turkey intervened in Cyprus, Turkey had a right to restore constitutional order, and as we now know, that is not what happened, and therefore the intervention became an invasion, in my opinion, which is also the interpretation of 191 member states of the United Nations. It's also the interpretation of British law courts and the European Court of Human Rights. So that's the terminology I'm going to use. I hope that's clear.